The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Breaking tonight, chaos in Caracas, Venezuela. The political turmoil unleashed after Nicolás Maduro claimed victory in the South American country's presidential election. There are widespread accusations of fraud, with the U.S. and other countries casting doubt on the results.
Now to Venezuela, where anger over the disputed results of the country's presidential election is growing. Violent protests erupted in the streets of Caracas yesterday, and at least 11 people are reported dead. Demonstrators are demanding authoritarian ruler Nicolás Maduro accept defeat. He is claiming victory, but his opponents say they have evidence showing they won the election. President Biden and other world leaders are calling on the government to release the voting data from Sunday's election.
All right, happy Thursday, everybody. Let's start off with a little Venezuela talk. So I think I mentioned this in Monday's episode, maybe, or Tuesday's episode. No, maybe it was Monday's episode. But yeah, mayhem, craziness in Venezuela. Now, again, I will say, whenever I see anything like this, based off of... That's funny. That's funny. Based off of my new deep, shallow dive mindset, you know, I try to look at it from every angle. I really do. And especially because I think I mentioned this in the episode, you know, Venezuela is another incredibly rich oil country. So give a listen to this.
We're buying oil from Venezuela. When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door. But now we're buying oil from Venezuela, so we're making a dictator very rich. Can you believe this? Nobody can believe it.
All right, so seriously, honestly, these are the things that I don't think I would have ever picked up on, you know, years ago. But now I pick up on them. And what I pick up on is this.
Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door.
He literally says Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over and gotten all that oil. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't say gotten all that oil for free. But anyway, my point is, you know, and this is seriously why I think it makes sense to look at both sides of everything. I mean, everything. Because when Trump comes out and says we would have taken the oil, I mean, this is United States imperialism in action. You know what I mean? Like, why do we get to take the oil for Venezuela? And I've talked about this in a couple episodes where it just doesn't make sense to me that Venezuela is not a much wealthier country because it has so much oil and so much oil reserves. And by oil reserves, I mean they're able to store a absolute ton of oil. So what's going on in Venezuela is this guy, Maduro, I mean, again, you got to look at both sides of this. He's getting painted as like this socialist dictator, but then on the other side, the people that are saying, hey, he's not a dictator. He just doesn't want to give his oil for free. And I hate to say it, but man, there's tremendous precedent. There's tremendous precedent with this stuff. It's the same thing that happened with Gaddafi in Libya, which I really need to dig into that and do a deep, shallow dive on that. But, you know, even to an extent with Saddam, you know, like it comes down to countries that have these natural resources and, you know, the Western allies in many cases, obviously the United States being the big dog in that, but also the UK and France, you know, these guys, they want those resources. And it's kind of similar to what Professor Flautis, if you listened to the episode from Tuesday with Professor Demetrius Flautis, where he talked about Russia and Ukraine. At the end, you know, I said, hey, do you have any other advice for people? He said, yeah, look to get news from African countries, look to get news from different sources so you can get a different perspective. And what prompted him to say that was he said that, what we don't know in the West is that the majority of the rest of the world sides with Putin more than NATO. So think about that. Like all of these African countries, which by the way, I follow them on Instagram, man, they drop some serious nuggies of knowledge. I really do enjoy, seeing what these African countries and a lot of these African leaders and their organizations say, because it's pretty enlightening, because it gives you a whole different perspective. It really does. It gives you a different perspective, and you get to see the world through someone else's eyes. So, similar to what Professor Flauta says, these countries, and Venezuela probably being, a prime example, the question really becomes, is Maduro, the current president, is he protecting his country, his people, his resources, or is he not? Now, I don't totally know, but I definitely think that is a plausible question to ask. All right, let me read you this. This is from this Substack that I follow by a writer named Caitlin Johnson. She's really good. She's based out of Australia. I'm actually trying to get her on the podcast. But the title is, "The U.S. does not care about democracy. It is trying to steal Venezuela's oil. As sure as night follows day, when a Latin American country elects a socialist leader, the U.S. instantly declares the results invalid. Make no mistake, when Western leaders talk about exporting democracy, this is what they mean. We prop up dictators all over the world and have a long history of interventions in Latin America. In recent years, it has been the turn of Peru and Bolivia, but now the empire is turning its attention to the number one Latin American boogeyman, Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela." All right, so again, I don't have this all worked out by any stretch, but I did want to bring this into today's episode because it obviously is something that is happening right now in Venezuela. So it's interesting the different people that have come and talked out about it. And one guy that has been incredibly vocal and all of a sudden is back in the news is John Bolton. Remember that dude? He's like the older guy with the 80s porn mustache that I think basically like turned on Trump. He was a big Trump supporter, and then Bolton kind of went against Trump. Actually, let me look this up. So it says John Bolton served as the national security advisor under President Donald Trump from April 2018 to September 2019. Their relationship was marked by both collaboration and conflict. Bolton, known for his hawkish foreign policy views, often pushed for a more aggressive stance on issues like Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela. Oh, how ironic, ChatGPT. However, he frequently clashed with Trump, who preferred a more isolationist and deal-oriented approach. Okay, I do remember them clashing. I totally remember them clashing. It says then, the relationship deteriorated over time, culminating in Bolton's departure from the administration. After leaving, Bolton became a vocal critic of Trump and published a memoir. Oh, that's right. He published a book. And it was called The Room Where It Happened, in which he criticized the president's foreign policy decisions and leadership style. Trump, in turn, disparaged Bolton, calling him a disgruntled, boring fool. That's pretty funny. That's pretty Trumpy to call him a boring fool. Anyway, yeah, he's the older guy. He's got the mustache. And so he's come out and talked all about this Venezuela stuff. And to me, this guy's a total warmonger. And so, this actually kind of supports the fact that we are in it for the oil reserves.
Somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat. I wrote about Venezuela in the book, and it turned out not to be successful.
First, we thought that getting Guaido to declare himself president would be enough to topple the regime. Then we thought putting aid on the border would be enough. Then we tried to sort of construct a kind of coup in April of last year, and it blew up in our face when all the generals that were supposed to break with Maduro decided to stick with him in the end. We undermined Norway's talks last summer.
If we ever did anything with Venezuela, it wouldn't be that way. It would be a slightly different. It would be called an invasion.
So again, here's a guy that, to me is just not credible, and he's shady. And he literally has come out on record talking about how he absolutely, agreed and called for basically taking over Venezuela, and it's to get their oil. I mean, it is to get their oil. So who knows what's really going on here, under the veil of quote unquote democracy. I will say, obviously, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty as to what is going on with the supply of oil from Saudi Arabia. By the way, oh my God, I cannot even believe I've completely forgotten to talk about this, but it's partially because, gosh, it has not been discussed at all. But supposedly Saudi Arabia put an end to the petrodollar, and this was a few months ago. They basically are no longer requiring countries to settle their oil transactions in dollars. And we've talked about the petrodollar a lot and the importance of it. And, I've had a lot of quotes from people that talked about how if that were to come to an end, it would be catastrophic for the United States. So obviously, I don't think it's been, maybe it just, the impact hasn't been felt yet. Anyway, I'll try to dig a little more on that. But I will say, with Venezuela being such a oil-rich country, maybe what's going on right now is part of the ramifications of Saudi Arabia putting an end to the petrodollar. That's definitely plausible. All right, I realize I've been saying plausible a little too much, so I'll stop saying that. All right, anyway, more to come on Venezuela. I'll try to dig a little deeper, see what else I can find. Now let's shift gears and bring on actually a music artist that at one point during my career I represented for their licensing and merchandising rights. And their manager, a guy named Corin Capshaw, was an investor in the company I started with actually, I didn't start it. These other guys started it, and then I joined it. It was called the Stronghold Group, and we represented Dave Matthews. So give a listen. Actually, we represented the Dave Matthews Band, but give a listen to Dave Matthews from last week. This was pretty hardcore.
I just think it's terrible when the majority of the world is looking at this man and what he's doing in Gaza, and then also what he's overseeing in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, that we're welcoming into the so-called sacred halls of our government. This has been an ongoing struggle for people that just want to have dignity and be able to live independent lives and dream of a better future. And this man is the pinnacle of the obstacle toward that freedom, and that we have him visiting the country is obscene. It's a disgusting show of support for someone that doesn't deserve our support. I'm ashamed that my tax dollars are going to the brutalizing of an entire people. It's shameful, and I'm ashamed that our government is welcoming him here.
I can't say I've listened to Dave Matthews Band much. Gosh, probably over the past decade, maybe even longer, maybe even like the past 15 years. But man, I used to listen to him a lot back in like the early 2000s for sure. And during college, the 1990s and the 2000s. But I never really thought he was very political. But obviously that was a pretty hardcore statement. And he was talking about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke to Congress last week. And, that was pretty intense. That was definitely pretty intense. I mean, I think everything he said was on point, though. I really do. I think everything he said was on point. And then here's another guy. This guy's legit. I'm actually trying to get him on the podcast. Hopefully I'm going to be able to start getting, kind of some more well-known names. Actually, I love the guests that I've brought on so far, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed them. but I definitely need to like level up a little bit and start bringing on some more names or people that at least you already know or might recognize. But this is Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He is a very, very outspoken guy that is all over the internet. But give a listen to what he said.
Americans, Mr. Netanyahu will visit Washington, D.C. this week. He will no doubt elaborate in private on his strategy for wider war in the Middle East. His plans should be taken seriously by every American citizen. We're close to $35 trillion in debt. This is almost 100% of our gross domestic product. We're paying $2.4 billion in interest every day. Everybody in Washington should have understood this a long time ago. A war with Iran would devastate our economy. Imagine the Straits of Hormuz, a narrow sea highway between Iran and Arab countries, closed. Every day, 1/5 of the world's oil travels through this passage. If war shuts it down, gas prices would skyrocket, affecting everything from your daily commute to the cost of groceries.
You know what? I just had a total epiphany while listening to that. What if what's going on in Venezuela is also part of what is happening in terms of, I've talked about a potential war with Iran, whether that's Netanyahu and Israel trying to pull us into that. But regardless, think about it. If there's concerns about oil supply, although supposedly we don't buy oil from Iran, but if there's concerns about oil supply, I think it definitely would make sense that the U.S. is looking for alternative sources, and Venezuela could be exactly that. Interesting. Let's think about that.
We're already feeling the punch from Houthi disruptions in the Red Sea. Now picture that problem multiplied many times over. A full-scale war with Iran wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It would trigger an economic crisis that would hit every American family hard, potentially leading to job losses, fortunes wiped out, and a deep recession.
All right. So again, I don't think any of this stuff happens in a vacuum. I really don't. And I think a lot of this stuff potentially is related. So now that we take in what Colonel Macgregor said, and, even Dave Matthews for that matter, that's interesting. That is interesting. The disputing the election and trying to basically put in a right-wing government, that's totally what they're trying to do in Venezuela. And you know what's funny? That is exactly what also happened in Ukraine. If you didn't listen, or if you did listen and you didn't pick up on it, Professor Flautas talked about how in 2014, when Viktor Yanukovych was democratically elected president of Ukraine, and he was a more centrist type guy. He basically was like, hey, we don't want to side with Russia, nor do we want to side with the United States and NATO. Just leave us alone. Let us be chill. Let us be in the middle. Let us be Switzerland. And the U.S. led a coup to overthrow him. So that happened. And that is definitely kind of what's happening right now with Venezuela. And so maybe, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. That makes a lot of sense. And especially because of the tensions with Iran and the oil situation, also the petrodollar with Saudi Arabia. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but man, all of that stuff absolutely could be connected, or interconnected, I should say. All right, quick little topic change. Are you guys watching the Olympics? I seriously love the Olympics. I really do. Not the opening ceremonies. I did not like those. But man, it is super fun to watch the Olympics, especially swimming. To me, swimming is the most interesting, until track and field. I do love track and field too. But man, these swimming are so fun. Like, I don't even care that much about the specific strokes. And I can't say I know a ton of the a ton of the athletes, maybe like I used to, but man, it is definitely interesting, and it is absolutely super cool to just watch them swim. God, they're so graceful. They're seriously so graceful. I really have enjoyed that. All right, so watch the Olympics. Support these athletes. I really do think you should. Anyway, I'm going to release a couple more guest episodes over the next few days. And then also, I am going to revisit the episode that I did, way back when, and it was about the Bernie's blackout. I've talked about it a few times, but I think it'll be good to go through this episode again and really understand how the media completely blacked out Bernie Sanders in 2020 when he was so far ahead of everybody. Biden was literally in fourth place. And then the media blackout started, and then COVID happened, and then all of a sudden, like literally Beto O'Rourke, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, they all dropped out the same weekend. They all threw their support behind Biden, and then about 4 days later, Bernie Sanders dropped out. And then COVID kicked into full gear. There were no more Democratic debates, and all of a sudden Biden became the candidate. It's really interesting. It really is. And man, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only 2020. So anyway, we'll revisit that episode. We'll crank out some more guest interviews. We will try and get a better handle on this Venezuela stuff. And then again, keep an eye out on what's going on between Israel and Iran and Hezbollah. The Israelis, they assassinated two other guys. They actually assassinated a top Hamas guy. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he was the lead negotiator. Okay, so this is interesting. Now, granted, he's a top Hamas guy, so all the media is cheering his assassination. But what's interesting about this guy was Ismail Haniyeh. That's right. You probably will recognize him. But anyway, he got assassinated in Iran. So he got assassinated inside Tehran while he was attending the coronation of the new Iranian president. And so he was assassinated inside Iran. There was another Iranian military guy assassinated in Damascus in Syria. So these are like two major assassinations. I don't know. They just don't make sense to me that how they could happen or how they could get it done, especially assassinating Haniyeh inside Tehran. That actually makes Iran look terrible. I mean, that makes them look super weak. Obviously, everyone's saying Israel's behind it. Actually, I think the IDF took credit for it. So the fact that they could go into your house and assassinate that dude, I mean, again, it's a bad look for you if you're Iran. So now, what's Iran going to do? Are they going to smack back? They kind of have to. And if they smack back, it kind of has to be a big one. It's not going to be the telegraphing of, the 800 dumb or the 300 dumb drones like it did that last time. We talked about that several times. So keep an eye out. Iran might strike Israel hard. And I don't know. Here we go. Maybe this is the next escalation of this. But last thing I was going to say about that Haniyeh guy, the Hamas leader, is it's pretty interesting, man. They killed his grandkids, then they killed his kids, and then they killed him. Now, again, he's a bad guy. They're all bad guys. So bad guys dying doesn't bother me. But it is interesting that they're killing the lead negotiator. And so, does Netanyahu want peace? Does Netanyahu want a ceasefire? Does anybody want a ceasefire? Does Iran want a ceasefire? Does America want a ceasefire? I don't know. War is business. And if there's a ceasefire, there's no more business. All right, call a spade a spade.
The ending was terrific.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.